Welcome, everyone. As promised, we are back with Immortal Lives in Speculative Fiction. If you'd like to support us, don't forget to check out those links in the comments section. And without further ado, we're going to get this rolling because this panel is too good for me to talk through it. I'm going to welcome our moderator, Alex Jennings. Alex is with Antenna. Alex is published in the Podunk Review, and if you caught that celebration last night, his short story knocked our socks off. Be sure to follow him on all his social media platforms because he has a big announcement coming up Tuesday. And he lives in Central City with his dog, Karate. Welcome, Alex.
Good morning, everyone. I am super excited about this panel. I've admired the work of Jamey, Hatley, and Megan Giddings for a long time. So I'm going to get things rolling and just go ahead and introduce them. Jamey Hatley is a Memphian obsessed with stories in ruin at the very edge of being forgotten. Her project, the Eureka Hotel, was a semi-finalist for the 2020 Sundance Episodic Lab. She was the inaugural Indie Memphis Black Screenwriting Fellow, selected by Academy Award winner Barry Jenkins in 2019. She wrote, directed, and produced a short film based on her story essay, Always Open, the Eureka Hotel, which was an official selection of the Indie Memphis Film Festival and the Black Film Festival of New Orleans. Her writing has appeared in O, the Oprah magazine, the Oxford American, the year's best YA speculative fiction anthology, and numerous other journals and publications. She was a Prose Fellow for the National Endowment for the Arts, a Rona Jaffe Foundation Writers Award winner, and is at work on an award-winning novel in progress, The Dream Singers, as well as a number of other projects in a variety of genres. Ms. Hatley is a member of the Writers Guild of America East. Follow her on Twitter at Jamey Hatley. Megan Giddings has degrees from University of Michigan and Indiana University. She is a fiction editor at The Offing and a senior features editor at The Rumpus. In 2018, she was a recipient of a Barbara Deming Memorial Fund grant for feminist fiction. Her stories are forthcoming or have been recently published in the Black Warrior Review, Arts and Letters, Gulf Coast, and the Iowa Review. Her novel Lakewood was published by Amistad in 2020, and her second novel, The Women Could Fly, is forthcoming. She's represented by Dan Conway of Writers House. Megan lives in the Midwest, and her Twitter is at MEGiddings. All right, so let's get this going. So Megan, I was talking to a friend about your work earlier this week, and I explained it to her as sometimes you write the kind of crossover SF where tropes are introduced so smoothly that they never feel intrusive. They never feel like what the story is about, although they're utterly necessary. I think Lakewood is a great example of this, as well as The Alive Girl, The Alive Sister, sorry. What about SF-nal tropes attracts and fascinates you, and how do you feel you include them in your fiction?
I love that question. I think what attracts me to tropes and also just the mixing of genres in general is that I don't feel like I feel like the only way you can capture actual life and living is by mixing in different genres. I feel like every day, especially this year is bonkers. It feels like you might be in sci-fi or horror already. Every day you wake up and the pandemic is still happening, but some people refuse to acknowledge that's happening. And you spend every day filled with anxiety. And I feel like identifying those tropes rather than just telling someone, this is how you should feel at that moment, it makes people connect more with my writing, because I think a good trope, even though it can feel like a cliche, if you insert it in the right way into your work, it gives the reader something to understand immediately. You can connect and then keep moving forward towards specificity. So I think of those as kind of like bridges to use each time.
Yeah. Jamey, a similar question for you. I know that you have directly published some genre fiction in genre markets. What do SF tropes mean to you, and what do you feel like they do for you?
I think because first I'm gonna say shout out to my agent Catherine Fawcett, who actually lives in New Orleans. I used to live in New Orleans for 7 years, so hey y'all, anybody who's there. But I think because I'm a Black woman in the South, I don't have very hard lines between genres like a lot of people do. Just being, and I'm also older. So like my parents were born in the 30s. I was born in the 70s. So I have a very Afro surreal experience. So what many people interpret as genre or genre tropes are just life to me. I just said on another panel that, I don't have to excavate the dead because the dead are with me. So I think my understanding of that. So I just kind of write the thing and then someone puts it somewhere, right? You mentioned Long Hidden, which was a beautiful anthology of speculative fictions from the margins of history. Like I wouldn't have considered that a genre story at all. So, and also because I think I have a marketing background, I don't think about what it is until after I've written it. But definitely, I'm aware of those tropes and actively use them. But I'm not so concerned about, am I doing Gothic right now? Am I doing sci-fi? Is this speculative? Like, I just let the work emerge and then see what I have and then tighten the bolts and use those things. Right. So they can call me whatever they want. They can call it work whatever they want if they call it good.
That makes sense. That definitely makes sense. So I know you've been back in Memphis for a while after living here in New Orleans. Do you feel like the shift in location did something for your work in terms of positioning you to create what came after, especially the essay and the film that's based on it?
Yeah, I think I will probably be interrogating that for a long time. My friend Tiara Jones says that I talk about New Orleans like my widowed husband, like my dead husband. And when I came back, I felt like I was a ghost haunting myself because I would encounter all of these selves. Like I could be in a cafe and run into someone that I know from when I was in kindergarten. I could run into someone that I knew from New Orleans. So it was a very strange experience. And I think from being outside, it let me look at Memphis in a way that I had never before. And one of my great misunderstandings was thinking I was just coming home and I wouldn't have to transition to come home. Like after 2 years, I made myself stop saying I just got back, right? So I'm always interrogating. Memphis and New Orleans have so much in common. It's on the same river, same poverty, same crime, same humidity, but there are different kind of cultural things. And so it made me kind of hyper aware of those kinds of things and the differences in even the rhythm of the language, So,
right.
Yeah. And I think I'm still sorting out. And also I was in Louisiana in graduate school when Katrina happened. So that big trauma, and I write about kind of a pandemic of dreams in my novel. So yeah, all of that snakes through pretty much everything that I write in whatever genre. So
Right. Let's see. So, Megan, in your story, The Alive Sister, one passage really jumped out at me. It's the one that reads, "Hate is an alligator pretending to be a log, ready to chomp you in half when you're calm and looking at it and thinking what a boring piece of wood. She will know what her sister's eyes looked like right before someone meant to protect them shot her." So I'd kind of like to talk about what that concept means and how it seems to infuse a lot of your work, both your short fiction and your novel, Lakewood, which, by the way, everyone needs to go buy immediately. That book is amazing, and I hope they make it into a movie and like 14 different TV series. So I guess what I'm asking is, what brought you to that understanding of hatred and what it can do and how it can twist your world so quickly?
I mean, in some ways, I feel like it's not an extraordinary experience. I mean, especially if you grow up in a predominantly white space like I did. I grew up in rural Michigan, where my family was one of two Black families in the area and one of like 5 families of color. You get really used to just seeing that people, they don't even think that their racism, like they don't even see it. I mean, it's happening right now in this country. They're trying to actively disenfranchise the voters of Detroit. And most people aren't calling it what it is, racism. It's, they know it's easier because white people don't want to talk about it. And I wrote that story you're referencing because I was so enraged. It was, a lot of it was inspired about my feelings after reading more about Tamir Rice's murder. And it's, I think some of it hit even more home to me because he was a Midwestern kid. He's in Cleveland, which, well, he's not in Cleveland anymore. But it was so wild to see so many people not process how racist that incident was, where you could see so many white people saying, well, he shouldn't have had a Nerf gun in a public space. He shouldn't have done this. It's really strange to talk about that story in some ways because I thought I wrote it like 4 years ago now, and I'm still angry. I still feel it, and I thought maybe that story would help me get to a place where I could talk about it without feeling a little heated or sounding emotional. But it's still there, and I mean that's the same issue with Lakewood too. Is I wrote that story in some ways because I felt like beyond how inhumane our healthcare system is, it's still deeply racist. It still is deeply privileging of rich people, and especially people who have proximity to whiteness. And I thought that I would become like less angry, but maybe some of it, it's just like, this is the year where finally all the things that are text to Black people are finally becoming text to other people. They can finally see all the things that we've been talking about for the last 60 years, maybe. But it's been like this constant conversation since March now about this book, about, well, is this really how it is? And it's like, yeah, deep down, this is how it is.
Exactly. That that book is so fascinating in the way that it handles generational trauma. Um, I feel like, at least in my own experience, generational trauma is one of those things where if you blink, you'll miss it, even though it suffuses most all of your experiences and conscious concerns. Um, One of the things that I thought the book did so well was make that invisible issue visible. But it did it so subtly, in my opinion, just like those SF tropes that were introduced in that book. Um, and like that kind of brings me to the connection that it makes to the story of Henrietta Lacks. I named this panel Immortal Lives in Speculative Fiction for a number of reasons. I feel like the ghost of Henrietta Lacks is still with us, not just in the discoveries that were made on her soul and body, but in the way she and her story were pushed aside for so long. And even in the making of the HBO film, like her family wasn't really involved in that. It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I'm asking is, how do you position your fiction to connect with those ideas and make the your preoccupations not just personal, but in many ways universal?
So for Lakewood, part of it is that I'm a really big researcher. So I did read The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. I did a lot of reading about the history of gynecology because, I mean, you have to go all the way back with that, where what we still mostly know about gynecology is based on those experiments that they were done on enslaved women who could not consent. And a lot of people still don't acknowledge that. I mean, there's still statues up of J. Marion Sims who did many of these things, and people don't want to acknowledge the contribution of the women who couldn't consent. And it's kind of just like this American trope over and over again. Like I read a lot of CIA documents that kept showing that the American populace, especially Black people, especially Indigenous people, but also poor white people, just poor people in general, were often like we are the easiest people to be taken advantage of by the government because we don't have that level of generational wealth and security. And so, especially for things like a small amount of money, you can get very quickly sucked into something that happens. And I'm also an experiential researcher where I did do contact lens studies and like made friends with a lot of the doctors so that I could ask them, like, how does an actual research study work? And also I wanted to feel what it would feel like. And then on the one hand, I wish that I became really good friends with one of the doctors, but it's also like one of those experiences where, like, for example, one was I couldn't handle the contacts at all. So I would have to go every night and someone wearing gloves would have to take the contact lenses out of my eyes for me. And they weren't even trying to hurt me, but it was still like one of the most like uncomfortable, terrible experiences I've ever had. Like trying to trust somebody to come close enough to my eye to touch it, and them getting more and more frustrated because they couldn't get the contact out of my eye. And I would journal about these experiences and how I felt during them, and how even though I understood as much as I could, I wrote a lot about my body and my feelings so that it wouldn't turn into a screed in Lakewood. That it wasn't just like, this is how angry I am or this is how things should be, but making sure that everything felt as lived in as possible. There's like this sense of displacement that you can get from your body when someone is just observing you and spending an hour watching you just look at things that I don't think I would have understood without doing that research.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Jamey, one of the stories that I read in preparation for this interview was The Drummer, which just like, whew, man, that story really got under my skin. And let me see, I'd like to start with a little quote from it before I ask this question. Let's see. Sorry, this is taking so long. Oh no. Where is it? Okay. Well, oh no, I found it. So the passage reads, the deacons wanted the drummer punished because even with his terrible skin, he was free to drive all around the country with the rack of colorful dresses that allowed entry to all manner of women's spaces. Because those women laughed in his presence and asked him advice about their underthings. Because those women held out their lovely wrists for him to spray with perfume. Because for the drummer, the soft smell of white flowers on a graceful neck was not just a dead memory, but his life. Because these women fussed over him and fed him and thought of him fondly. I think what I'd like to ask you about this story is how it seems to turn on race, but also so much more than that. Race is never purely incidental to the events of the story. It kind of echoes through everything, but the sort of separation that the deacons, like these older black men who spend their time drinking and talking smack and witness this crazy traffic accident, are they sort of feel separated and diminished from the rest of their community in a way, and their feelings about the drummer and about the events that have taken place are portrayed so faithfully and baldly. And I'd like to know, like, what was your way into that story and how did you bring out such emotional depth and really make it live?
Well, I always try to write people. You know, every writer has a different approach. And oftentimes I will write, I feel like I'm always one thing away from something. So I might have the events right, but the emotion is wrong. But I don't know it. So I just keep writing, and I'll write something down the road and then I'll go back and be like, oh, this is what this means. And I'll tell this is a crazy story. So the name The Drummer comes from what I thought was a mispronunciation of my mother. My mother, whenever we would see like someone in a station wagon, had racks of clothes, she was like, oh, that's a drummer, you know? And I'm like, a drummer? What? Like, I couldn't parse out like what it was. And I was reading a Faulkner novel, and it was talking about a drummer who was, it's an old-fashioned word for a traveling salesman. And I was like, well, look at you underestimating your mama. So that kind of image had stuck in my head. And so the main character, Mr. Bobo, was a sanitation worker during the Memphis sanitation strike. He had just retired. And so what happens is he goes and he takes this walk. He's dancing, like the drummers are out there. They kind of drunk. They like, yeah, get it. And he's in the middle of the street, and there's this crazy fog. And this car comes barreling through, but it doesn't hit him, though. It's an almost accident, but he's still, right? And ends up all of these scars. So when we're talking about generational trauma, that's my representation kind of that. And I'm looking at generational trauma and how it manifests like you said, how you can blink your eye and not see it. It becomes this, I'm sorry about that. It becomes this thing that is so normal in your family or in your life that you don't know that it is actually trauma. And so I often, because I have been able to be educated, although my parents live in a very, what people would say, dangerous neighborhood. I even live in a, you're probably gonna hear police siren or whatever, feel protected in a way. And so when you are witness to these things that you could not stop, there's a kind of wounding that people who are traumatized don't know what to do with. And I think that has been Black people, Indigenous people, poor people in America, right? So that's where shame comes in. So that's where people often deny what is happening to them because it is so hurtful to even look at it straight on. So the fact that this white man, he got his car, he got his business, he can go, white women are not afraid of him, they let him in their homes, they changing clothes around him, it's all kiki. They know that this is a thing that they do not have access to. They will never have access to. And because of who they are, even though they witnessed this thing, and they want to say, this white man, he was there. He was there. We don't know what happened. We don't know. Yeah, we didn't see exactly, but he was there. And they can do nothing about it because they know that they won't be believed. The police are not on that side. But I didn't know what that meant. I was actually writing in the Rue de la Course on Oak Street. I kid you not. And I was like, I need a snack. So I go across the street to that Rite Aid that's not there anymore. I run into a friend because I needed a snack and some nail polish. That's what I decided I needed to finish this piece. I run into a friend, I put my hand down on a shelf, and there are all of these miniature cars. The car is a very specific thing. It is a 1955 Chevrolet Bel Air station wagon mint green. The toy car is I pick it up and turn it up. It's a 1955 Bel Air station wagon mint green. I go back and sit down to write and look up. There is a station wagon with a rack full of clothes going by the window. And I was like, am I dead? Am I a ghost? What I was like so unnerved and afraid in that moment because things like that happen. Like I said, the veil becomes thin, but that's when I knew what it meant, what I was missing. I knew that and at first I thought that, this white man killed him. It was clear he killed him and he got away with it. It's not like that because that's not how racism always works. Yes, often we are killed, but often we are microaggressed. We are, it can't be that. No, that's not what happened. Why are y'all so angry? Right?
Yeah.
And so I was trying to depict that, right? And so these men who did not have these full lives are not believed at home, they're not believed in the street. And then whatever happened, they were right there and could not stop it.
Right. That really came through well.
Yeah. Thank you. It's trauma.
Right. There's just so much of that in our experience. And now I feel like against the backdrop of this pandemic, our trauma is contextualized and understood in a different way. Like we now have an entire generation of the world who's going through this COVID nightmare, and is going to have its shadow on their heart for a generation, I'd say. Which brings me to another older work of yours, Jamey. I read your micro essay in BuzzFeed about making a place for grief at the Thanksgiving table. And one of the things that I couldn't stop thinking about was how timely it is for what we're going through now, it being almost Thanksgiving and so many people being separated from their families. And this particular quote jumped out at me. Hopefully, it won't take as long to find as the last one. uh, the best of families remake themselves again and again so that you are always home. I'd say that idea definitely deserves to be considered closely again. And has the pandemic redefined or added to this understanding for you?
Whoa, you went way back. And that essay is about a whole. So, like, my parents are older. My mother and father just had their birthdays, so they made 86 and 87. My grandmother, when she became frail, came to live. I went to college. She came to my mom's. My father got out of his bed, moved into another room, and there was a hospital bed where my mother took care of her. She could get her up and down, and she was frail. And when she passed away and they took that hospital bed away, it was like this hole, right? Someone asked me yesterday, like, what has the trauma of the pandemic taught me? And I was like, I don't know that I will have an answer for that for a long time. I know what it did do was trigger other traumas. Like my trauma that I didn't know was trauma from Katrina, like being locked up in I was in graduate school trying to be a writer, learning, and having tanks parked in my apartment complex. When I went back to school to a poetry class the first day, there was a person with an AK-47 on my usual route. So coming up into these times, because my parents are older, I'm older, we have these conditions, I have been much more vigilant with my friends than my friends have been. So I've been more inside. And it's just really kind of clarified for me how much room some people have had the ability to take up. And I think the pandemic, you can't talk about the pandemic without talking about the election. And so people are like, oh, the 4 years of trauma are over. And I was like, for people who were brought here, indigenous people, this land is built upon trauma. So while you nurse your 4 years of trauma, understand that we have hundreds of years of trauma that is rising up through our blood in ways that we don't even understand. And it is a privilege that you get to think that it was 4 years, because it wasn't 4 years. When we had a Black president, we were being traumatized. You know, when before we had been traumatized, America is built on trauma, genocide, stolen labor, and land. So that you could say that, we have a lot of work to do. And frankly, I don't want to be the one to usher you, to midwife you through that work. So talk amongst yourselves, white people, because it's not, we didn't do this, right? So, and I mean, my whole, like my novel is about a pandemic of dreams, right? So like this cliche, as Megan was talking about, you used to have these tropes, right? Tropes are useful because people get it, right? People understand them. So Toni Morrison said a cliche is useful because people immediately understand it. And people say, follow your dreams. Well, that means something different from a Black girl from Memphis, Tennessee, from Walker Homes, one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city, to try to strive, right? So there's a cost for me, right? I'm not where my peers are. That doesn't mean I'm not better. So like this pandemic has brought out all of these health inequities, right? I'm trying to get prescriptions for my anxiety field right now, right? That I know other people are not having a problem doing. So it's made me really think about these ancestral technologies that we had when we had nothing, right? My mentor is Arthur Flowers. He calls himself a literary hoodoo. And like, I feel like it's all hands on deck. Whatever tool you got, you use that tool to survive. And for some people, it's not survival. Like they just not thriving as well. So they just want to get back to flourish. But for a lot of us, it's just like we're just trying to live, just trying to stay alive through this.
Right.
You know? So I feel like as a Black, especially a Black Southern woman, I'm always living in a pandemic. It's just like, what degree level is it up to? Because we had a whole protest, people acting like people weren't in the streets.
Right.
This just happened all this year.
It really has. It feels like such a long time.
But it's over. We good. It's 4 years done. Everybody's drinking their Chardonnay or something.
I don't know. I don't think they're going to be able to put these events aside as quickly as they seem to think.
But they're doing it. Are you on the Twitter?
I'm on Twitter. They're trying to. But I don't think that's going to work. I just remember when I was growing up, hearing old folks talk about the Depression and how intense and crazy those stories are. Which actually brings me to another idea. I feel that not just the experience of being a person of color, but specifically women of color, are on the forefront of speculative fiction all across the board, not just in science fiction and fantasy, but in crime fiction. Cherie Renee Thomas just took over the magazine of fantasy and science fiction.
That's my homegirl from Memphis. Gang, gang.
Exactly. I feel like it is an unfair burden on Black women to have to pull these subgenres kicking and screaming into the future. But I feel like both of you are participating in that, especially in the process of bringing these tropes and ideas and this broader palette of figuration into mainstream fiction, and sort of like a reverse colonization of that. So one of the things that I want to ask you is, where do you see yourself going from where you are right now? I know both of you are currently working on novels. do you feel that there are speculative elements in those, and that they are going to alter the course of your careers in significant ways? Whoever wants to tackle that first.
Megan, you want to take it?
Sure, I'll try. So my second novel, The Women Could Fly, it's about witches. And it's also taking place in a world that is our world, except for there are witches. It's modern day. And I bring in elements of folk tales. Some are traditionally like white witch folk tales that I'm rewriting to make Black. Some are based off of like the folktale collection, The People Could Fly, that is all about Black and African American folktales. And I really wanted to write a book that some of it is just that I was so tired of reading books about witches, and they're always like an ethereal white woman in the wrong place at the wrong time. And yep, exactly, Jamey. And I wanted to talk specifically about how women are so monitored, and I'm using a generic women on purpose at the moment,
right,
where we're so regulated still. And then I wanted to keep narrowing it down through the novel so that you see that even in a world where women feel this way, Black women, we have it worse. We're extra monitored. If we don't conform, we're often more harshly punished than anybody else. And I'm hoping that by the end of the novel, a reader who is Black will see themselves and also connect to it. And I hope that maybe readers who aren't Black will understand a little more about what it's like to feel just so tired of when people say like women's issues, when it's really not, it's not the same. It genuinely, when you're talking about feminism, it usually still does mean white women. It doesn't mean women outside of that.
right.
I don't know if this book will change my career. I've kind of gotten used to the idea that as long as I can keep publishing books, and especially I'm lucky that I'm at Amistad, where almost everybody who will touch my book is either Black or a person of color. And it changes a lot of how I feel about writing. Like I feel much more freedom this time knowing I'm still at Amistad to write this book than when I felt like when I wrote Lakewood and was really worried about how to even get like a major publisher to pick this up or understand it. But one of my friends said even this morning that it's really hard for books that straddle different ideas and that don't fit neatly to get recognized by mainstream publishing. And that's why I've kind of stopped caring about like awards already. I thought I would care a little more, but I would rather have the space to write my books that are weird or doesn't fit into the idea of what a Black narrative should be. And by that, I mean what white mainstream publishing thinks a Black narrative should be. That I feel really lucky that I get to write my books at all right now. I hope that changes so that one day I can be like, you know, I do really want awards. But I feel right now that to feel that way is a little too optimistic.
That's true. In many ways, that's definitely true. Jamey, what is your take on the same question? Like, how do you see what you're doing right now, carrying your career in a specific direction? And yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
One, white men especially get to break genre all the time. Nobody's talking to Michael Chabon when he's doing it, right? They can mix and match whatever they want to do. That's first of all. So this is a publishing thing. And because I have a background in marketing, I always, whenever I see one of those books, I'm like, what book was on some agent or some editor's desk that was Black that they said no to, and a white book that was lesser, right? Got through. That's just business. Okay. Everything I do is hoodoo. And when Megan is talking about Black witches, if you tip over to the Instagram, when I talk about these ancestral technologies, the millennial girls is doing work. Those old school people are doing work. So it's not necessarily a trope, because like I said, it's all hands on deck. So everything I write, if it's a recipe I have a recipe that's going to be in a cookbook, it's like a prose poem. Everything I write, generally, whether I'm trying to or not, has speculation, because I am trying to imagine a place of liberation for myself and people that I love. So unfortunately, to do that, I have to speculate. So yes, I think it will transform my career. And so just as Megan has used these tropes, and yes, always because I love me a white witch too. I love me a witch story. But I'm like, really? And then, like they got the one Black witch girl, girlfriend, she's gonna die, or she's gonna fall in love with the white boy or whatever. But I'm hoodoo. I'm country folk magic. Right. And so not even New Orleans voodoo, which is a religion that's different. Like, I am interested in what came over here, what made it through the Middle Passage, and my ancestors who got here and could make magic from what they stole. Right. So I feel like even when I use folk tales also, right? But I also have to interrogate those folk tales. One of the major folk tales I wrote towards this story for years was from the Brer Rabbit tales, right? And it's why we carry the rabbit's foot, basically. And so, long story short, is oldest witch in the world, go flying around. It's a famine. It's like this. She could take every food. She can get all the food out the pot. But Brer Rabbit, he could go in and out. He eating good. He's straight. All the animals like, Rabbit, you got to help us out. We starving out here. He like, ate it for you. And he's like, no. So they keep interceding. And so he like, okay, I'm going to do something. So he come, Rabbit, the witch sheds her skin. You put pepper in it. She can't get her skin back. If she can't get her skin back on by sunrise, boop, she's gone. She's dead. So I wrote like characters based on that for a long time. And I don't know what it was, but I was like, whoa, wait, flag on the play. I'm like, why does the old, smart, powerful woman who can fly have to die? Why can't this dumbass learn from her? Right? Because we have been told these stories before we had language. When my parents, who, like I said, grew up in the Depression. Like, I went to an outhouse at my granny's house. Like, I've been told the Tar Baby story and these stories my entire life, right? So it took me decades to interrogate, because I swallowed that story whole. And maybe because I'm getting older, like, I'm like, no, you're not gonna take me out, because you don't have it, right? So I think that we must interrogate these things, not only for other people, because we know what white folks get wrong, but we also have to interrogate what we get wrong too. Because you know how embarrassed I would have been if I would have written that story that way and let that man kill that woman. Shame, because I watch a lot of people do it. So I'm the slowest writer on earth. Been writing the same novel for 20 some years, but because I try to write people, and I want everything to be a work of liberation, then I have to work to get it right. So I hope to not just transform my career, I want to transform my life and the life of my people, right? It was so beautiful. My mentor, Arthur Flowers, wrote basically a holy book. And the other day on Instagram, I saw the Hoodoo girls using it as bibliomancy. That's where you like open up a book and you look at a thing. That's the way he wanted it used. Like, I was undone by that. So not every writer does this, right? Every writer has their own thing. But to me, every work is a spell. Some people, it's just going to be a good story. But for some people, it's a path. It's a door. And so I just want to write doors for people to walk through.
Yeah.
Including myself, because I almost really walked through that door.
Absolutely. That really comes through in your work as well. There are many specific questions I want to ask you each about many of your works, but I guess it's time to switch to something a little bit more general. Like, in terms of your influences, you've already mentioned a lot of those, but what media are you taking in right now, and how do you feel like your consumption habits have changed against the pandemic? Megan, I guess I'll ask you to tackle that first.
Yeah, so my brother, he was doing a lot of the pandemic alone, and he came to live with me this summer because he's a grad student, can do stuff remotely. So he's really changed some of my habits because he's really into anime, and we've been watching a lot of anime together. There's this one right now that we're watching I can't remember the whole title, but it's about a boy who is a demon slayer, and he and his sister travel through Japan and encounter all these demons. And also his sister has been transformed into a demon. And the visuals are so gross, but I don't know if I would have been able to watch it a year or two ago, but now I'm like, let's put that on. Let's keep watching. And it's something that we've been sharing a lot together lately.
That is great. I love that. Jamey, what about you?
In the past, just recent, like during election time, I found myself watching cozy British mysteries. Like, I was not watching. I was like, I would give myself a time limit on the Twitters. I would not, no CNN, no broadcast TV. And I told my mama, who they have the news on all the time, like, don't tell me anything. Like, I accidentally saw some news when I had to take them to the doctor. And it was only weeks into that I realized I was watching that, because if you get the right period piece, there are so few Black people that no harm comes to anyone Black. And so that's what I needed, because in my life, like, my neighbor called me 2 days ago because there was a murder 1 block up from us a few weeks before that, and so I could not take that. So during the pandemic, I have been trying to get ready to write letters, gathering my stationery, getting my typewriter out, looking at art books, reading works in translation from Black people from other countries, trying to reconnect to the things, the pure things, like not let passive things come into me and shape me. Like, to be to curate what I'm consuming and what I'm becoming, because it's very important for me to be choosing, because that's what a pandemic, that's what racism does. It flattens out the amount of choices that you think that you have.
Right.
Yes, we do need to wear masks, we need to be safe, but we can also choose the ways that we go about our lives. And so we can be intentional about setting ourselves up. So reading about these little old ladies who was making this 4 Thieves vinegar and, making these magical waters, lighting these candles, keeping these altars lit. That's been my thing. And I think our ancestors are ready. So however you go, however far you go into that, take a listen, whatever, like ask an elder about something. I was writing a piece about whiskey and I was asking my mother about like a great uncle. And she was like, no, your Uncle Moses, they had a, I don't know where the still was. They had it, they was making moonshine. I was like, really? I was like, were they selling it? She was like, they were drinking it. Right? So doing these things that I know that my grandmother did and my mother did, even if I'm doing it in a bougie way, like have centered me and grounded me in a way, because this is awful. But also Memphis had yellow fever. We had enslavement. We come from people who survived the most horrible things. So I've been trying to tap into that and lean upon their strength.
Absolutely. That's absolutely necessary. Well, I guess we're about to wrap up soon. Doesn't look like we've got any questions in the comments, but I very much enjoyed talking with the both of you, and I want to say in a very real way that I appreciate so much your service to the field and your service to the culture, because I really do feel like you are pushing both of those areas forward in a significant way, and I'm glad to have encountered your work and gotten a chance to talk with you, even if it's not in person. Man, I really want to talk about Through Valleys. I really do, but we don't have the time.
Good.
I mean, especially
P Valley was a real. Well, we call it PV. Was a real place. It's a whole story about it. And I just talked to Katori Hall the other day, and I told her, I was like, I live in Chucalissa City because where I live, so the P Valley of the TV show is in Mississippi, but actually Memphis is based off of Memphis. So where my parents live, 4 miles down the road is a Native American Indian mound, and 1 mile is torn down now, but it was a housing complex known as Pussy Valley. So I actually come from there.
Are either of y'all watching Star Trek Discovery right now?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, it's like it's very Afrofuturist. Like it's finally a. There are 2 Star Trek shows now centered on Black women as the leads, and I can't get enough of it. I was really hoping y'all were watching that so I could ask you about the most recent episode.
Well, I have a theory about Lovecraft, about who the actual hero. If you know Hero's journey at all, you'll know who the hero is in that story. I'll say on that.
Yeah, we could talk for a long time about that show as well. That, like, just to see 2 different shows handle the Tulsa massacre so close together, it's really strange. I was tweeting the other day about how I feel like seeing a mainstream TV show handle the Move bombing in 1985 in Philly is going to just feel like hell freezing over. I don't think it's going to take as long as it did for somebody to mention Tulsa.
Yeah, I was like, y'all should read some Weidman. I was like, how come y'all don't know about this? But the panel I was on before was historians, like actual historians. And I was like, y'all are talking to each other. Remember, these are people. Mm-hmm. So it was called Excavating Multicultural Lives. And I was like, some of us, we don't have to excavate this. We already know these things. Right. And it's annoying that you don't. But that's the power of art, because without Watchmen, without Lovecraft, without, Star Trek, without these shows, all these white people had no clue. And I'm like, we literally learned about this in junior high school.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an old school comic book nerd, so I was into Watchmen as a graphic novel in the first place. But then to see this adaptation on HBO place an alternate history Bass Reeves serial in the middle of the Tulsa massacre, I mean, all right, well, we got to stop there. We're out of time. But thank you so much for chatting with me.
Alex, you were great.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. And I can't wait to read Lakewood.
I can't wait to read your new novel when it comes out.
Oh, God, don't.
I'm sorry, but
I have an essay link out now. You can read that.
I need to get on the essay tip myself. Okay.
Guys, so much. It's been a pleasure. I'm over here nerding out because I really want to see next year writers respond to Lovecraft as a session at Words and Music. That'd be really cool.
I would love to be a part of that.
Okay. We're planning for 2021 already, y'all. All right. So thank you so much to everyone for that amazing discussion. This is one of the ones I'm going to be watching on Facebook and YouTube again, because I feel like there was so much rich discussion to absorb. I need to see it again. And the good news is you all can do that. You can go to One Book One New Orleans YouTube channel or the Words and Music Facebook page to catch anything you missed during this festival, including your chance to donate to support us. Remember, everything is available on a donation basis. You can donate $1 or $1,000, whatever you have in your hearts and your wallets to give, because this pandemic has hit us all really hard. So you can go to wordsandmusicnola@gmail.com on PayPal and support us there. You can text WAM20 WAM20 to 44321, or you can check out the comments section in Facebook and YouTube and you'll see a link. You can click that. Don't forget to order the author's works at our virtual bookstore powered by Tubby and Coos. And we will see you again in 12 minutes for Writing Music with Melissa A. Weber, Kyle DeCoste, Joel Dinnerstein, and Tony Bolden. I was a student of 2 out of the 4 people, so that'll be really cool to see. I'll see you guys around. Thank you, and bye.